everybody. My name is María Kubica. I'm a civil and comparative law professor at Loyola University of Andalucía in Seville, Spain. And today it is my immense pleasure to introduce to you Professor Michael Green, Bess and Walter Williams Professor of Law at Wake Forest University in North Carolina in the United States. Professor Green is one of the best scholars specialized in tort law in the United States and work closely with American Law Institute as a reporter of a statement third of torts, and is a member also of European Group on Tort Law. It is my pleasure also to introduce Professor Green, not only because he is one of my mentors, although he was not my supervisor, he is supervisor of my thesis. He supervised my work during my research stay at Wake Forest University in the year 2009. And it was a great time that I've spent there, and a great experience, professional experience. And I stay in a close contact with Professor Green till nowadays, and I consider him as one of the very good friends of mine. Today we are going to speak about US scholar research about submission and placement strategies. Professor Green, so where is the first place a US scholar goes to conduct research on a project?
Well, let me come back to answering that question in just a minute. First of all, I want to say what a pleasure it was to work with you in 2009 when you came to Wake Forest, and I got to help you with your research about strict liability. And the satisfaction from seeing what you did during that time to become the academic that you have become is one of the most fulfilling roles that a professor can have. So the return here was mutual among us. The second thing I want to say is that what I'm going to speak about today is really only about researching US law and publishing articles in US legal journals. I don't research law in other countries that's not in English, and I don't do much of that. So this is about what an American scholar who does predominantly domestic US research and writing does in his life of doing research and writing. So the first place that I go to when I'm doing research is to my institutional library. That's where materials that I might use are located. But I don't go to a library like this, not today. Back when I was in law school, this might have been where I started. Today, where I go is online and to the website for my library at Wake Forest University, where I find the materials that, or at least I get access to the materials that I'm going to use in my research. So you see here, I've highlighted Hein Online, Lexis, and Westlaw. I imagine you are familiar with at least Westlaw, which I gather is used around the world. Westlaw and Lexis are particularly important because in a common law system, cases are much of the stuff that we use, particularly in the research I do, which is a lot of doctrinal work about the doctrine of the law, and cases, of course, contain that law in common law areas where the legislature has not acted. Lexis and Westlaw, let's see here. Oh yeah, okay. So Lexis and Westlaw are subscription services. I can only get them through the law school. when I retire, I will not have access to them. I find that I prefer one because I become familiar with it, but there are advantages to each. I just discovered I was trying to count how many citations there were to a restatement of torts, and there's a limit on how many cases you can get in response to a search of 10,000. You can't get more than 10,000. It stops. Well, there's a way around that in Lexis that there's not in Westlaw. So there are slight differences in what they turn up in response to searches. So if I want to be completely thorough, I should do searches in both Westlaw and in Lexis. Hein Online is not cases, but Hein Online has every American legal periodical article that has been published. Westlaw and Lexis are not nearly as good. They're spotty with their coverage of law journal articles. Hein Online, it has them all, and it has them in PDFs of the actual journal page, so you can see it there. Hein Online also has another useful feature for me, which is it's called classic treatises. So I can go to Hein Online and find a treatise that was written about tort law at the beginning of the 20th century. In fact, I can find all the treatises that were written in the early 20th century about tort law. And if you're doing historical work, those classic treatises can be very helpful. ProQuest is another subscription service that's available through my library. Oh, let me stay with ProQuest. I'm going to show you what I can get, a search page for ProQuest. But another source that I use is called Social Science Research Network. It's abbreviated SSRN. This is open source. You can go to ssrn.com right now and see what's there. Let me go back to ProQuest. And this is, again, this I can only do through my institutional library because it's a subscription service. But I can do a search here for articles, and it's not limited to law. I can get an article about accounting and tax standards. That's one of the choices that I have. And it's not limited to just journal articles. There's other materials, dissertations, for example, that ProQuest has available and can get me to. So particularly if I'm doing social science research outside the law field, ProQuest can be very helpful. This is SSRN. SSRN is a place where scholars post their work, often before it's published in a journal. So I might write an article, and while I'm submitting it, I post it to SSRN. So it's available to all other scholars who might be interested in the subject that I'm writing about. It is also not limited to legal articles. So you can find other social science research work on here. And it typically has abstracts and then often full article in a PDF form. So this is a really good source if those other ones, Westlaw, Lexis, Hein Online, don't have an article that you're looking for, or just as a place to start. You can search by subject and find what SSRN has on its website.
Okay, that sounds great for the core of your legal research, but what about monographs?
Okay, that's a good question. What about books and monographs? Well, one thing I understand from my librarian is that open access to ebooks has multiplied an enormous amount over the past during the pandemic COVID-19. And there's many more ebooks that are available open source on the internet. Let me tell you about one, Internet Archive. This is open access. It's a nonprofit library of millions of books and other materials that you can get to. It's a little complicated to maneuver around, but this is a place where if your library doesn't have a book that you're looking for, this is an easy first step in trying to locate that book. WorldCat is also open access. You can go there, and I believe WorldCat has every book that is published in its catalog. Now, you don't get the book. You don't get the material in the book. This is simply a confirmation of author, title, publication date, but it does have, excuse me, it does have the location of that book in libraries and in libraries nearest to where you're searching from. So if I'm at Loyola University in Sevilla and I'm looking for a book that is not in that university's library, I might find that the book is available in the library of the University of Barcelona, which I don't know how much you have what we call interlibrary loan in Europe, but in the United States, if there's a monograph I want that's not in our library, not available online, my library will see if, let's say, the University of North Carolina has the book, will either lend the physical book, send it over to Wake Forest, or if all I want are a couple of pages, they'll take a picture of those pages and then ship those over in electronic form. Google Scholar is another great source for open access materials. In addition to monographs, I should point out that it is a free source for US legal material, legal articles. And as you may be able to see here, you have a choice of looking for searching for case law. And it will, if I search for case law, it will let me search for the law of Alabama or the law decisions of the Supreme Court. Not only that, but as you can see here, I do some work at the intersection of medicine, science, and law. And we have access to the leading English language medical journals and science journals, the New England Journal of Medicine and the Journal of the American Medical Association. Those are the premier medical journals in the US. Lancet is the premier in Britain. And Nature and Science are premier journals in the sciences that are English language journals. So these are all places that I might go to try and locate materials that will help me in my work.
Okay, that's very helpful. Any more research hints for us?
Yeah, I want to tell you about LibGuides. Maybe much of what I've said so far you already know about, but LibGuides are put together by libraries to educate people, law students, faculty, lay people, about a particular subject. So they put it together. It's on the website. You can search for them. And here's one that I picked out just to show you. This is from American University, Washington College of Law. And the Pence Law Library there put together a LibGuide on publishing your papers, selecting the best journal. And this is designed to help you. You've got a paper, you want to publish it. This is a place you can go to get information about selecting the best journal for your articles. They can also be used for guidance about particular subjects. So here's another one that comes from the University of California, Hastings Law Library. And this is a guide to finding Japanese law. It doesn't have the Japanese law, but it tells you where you can go to find materials that might provide you Japanese law in which you're interested. So there are lots of other LibGuides that have been put together. You just go and you search LibGuide about copyright law in the United States. And there's probably a LibGuide or one or more out there that can give you a primer on getting access to American law about copyright law.
Okay, so let's say that I just finished an article about the federal statement of torts and I would like to submit to a US journal. How do I find out about potential journals to submit to?
Okay, so let me just say I applaud your selection of your subject. That's a great subject to be writing about, Maria. There's, in fact, no better. But let me go here and tell you a little bit about US law journals. First of all, there's hundreds of them. Every law school in the United States has at least one journal. Many have more than one. My own law school has 3 different journals. 2 of them are specialty journals. One is a general journal, the Wake Forest University Law Review. Many are, as I just suggested, subject specific. So there might be a Duke Business Law Journal or a Emory Intellectual Property Law Journal. These are all specialty journals that limit what they publish to a subject specific matter. There are many general journals, but there are a lot of specialty journals.
Okay, so one more question before we go on submitting an article. When can I find advice on crafting a thesis, how to structure an article for US journal, and the method of analysis in US scholarly work?
Yeah, good question. We can come back to this because this is what I have that is responsive to your question, Maria. This is a book, a paperback book that's designed to assist those who are beginning in their law journal writing, their legal research writing. But it's chock full of help about developing a thesis, about what an introduction should look like, what a conclusion should look like, and speaking in the voice of a US scholar. I mean, we have a certain method of syntax and style that this will give you a heads up on. It also has information in it, a chapter about placing your article once you've finished it. So I'm glad we got a chance to do this. This is available, I'm sure, from virtually any online bookshop. But let me go back because there's a few more things I want to say about law journals. Virtually all law journals in the United States are student edited. There are students who pick the articles, accept the articles, read them and accept them. They are involved in editing them and then in the final publication process. There are a handful that are peer reviewed, but just maybe one handful that are peer reviewed. We also do not have single submission rules. So you finish that article on the third restatement, Maria, and you can send it to 1, 12, or 120 journals at the same time.
That is very interesting because we cannot do it here in Europe.
Yeah, and I understood that. And of course, that's the case for peer-reviewed journals in the United States. So when my daughter writes a medical or scientific journal, she can only submit to one. My son, who's an economist, only submits to one, but those are all peer-reviewed journals. Student journals, I think, well, I know student edited journals in law in the United States, they are multiple submission. There's no limitation. There tend to be, for almost all the journals, 2 windows a year in which they are looking for articles and which is the time to submit your article. And that's February and August. So in February, the student editors will be looking for, let's say, 12 articles to fill the next 3 issues of their journal. Almost all journals have websites with information for people who are thinking about submitting to that journal. So you didn't ask me, but I'm going to answer the question, okay, how do I find these journals? Well, one source is the first one listed here, Washington and Lee, has a ranking of law journals. Hein Online, you can go to and find legal journals. LibGuides, such as the Pence Library LibGuide that I showed you earlier, also have similar information available or might refer you to one of these other sources. The Goodyear last item here is specific about submitting to specialty and non-flagship law journal articles. So if you're going to submit a tax article or a comparative law article or a copyright law article, this is a good source to consult to determine where you're going to submit and how to submit.
Okay, any final tips?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Oh, this is more information on submitting to law journals. I mentioned the non-specialty law journals. This is an article, the Rostron and Levitt, they update this about every year or 2 years, and it's information about submitting articles. Scholastica, I need to tell you about because this is an online source where you can submit your article to any number of journals that you select. Scholastica, I think, has connections with almost all journals. So I can go to Scholastica, upload my article, and then ask them to submit it. And I just check the journals I want to submit. Okay, that's great. What's the downside? The downside is each journal you submit to costs $6.50 American dollars. If you're submitting to a lot of journals, that can get very expensive. I have colleagues who submit young colleagues who submit their articles to 60 or 80 journals. Well, that's hundreds of dollars that they are paying, actually, that the law school is paying for those multiple submissions.
That's
So,
very interesting because I think that a majority of my colleagues are not aware of such a possibility. Me personally, I haven't heard about Scholastica before.
Okay.
So
well, it's there and you can get to it very easily. And it's very easy to use. It's not free. An alternative to Scholastica is that most law journals will accept email submissions. But to determine that, what you want to do is go to the journal website and see what they say about submitting, whether they accept Scholastica. If you go to Scholastica, they show you all the journals that they can submit to. But if you go to the journal website, you can find out about whether email submissions are accepted. Many of them do that. Okay, you asked for tips and I didn't respond. Here's a few final thoughts about getting your article accepted at the top journal that you can get it accepted at. First is be sure your citation form is based on the Blue Book, a uniform system of citation, 21st edition. All law reviews use that system of citation. And while students often can't tell about the quality of an article, they can tell about whether your article is carefully Blue Book. They can also tell if it has typos or grammatical problems with it. And I think those affect their judgments about which articles they accept and which they don't. Format your article in Word so it looks like a law review article. I have here a format for what law review, at least US law review journals, look like. And you can take this. I hope that all of these slides will be available to you. But this shows you the fonts and the formatting for a law review article. Make your law review article look like this when you submit either through Scholastica or in email. Oh, I didn't want to go there. I'm sorry. The key components, students can't read everything that's submitted. They get hundreds and hundreds of submissions because of the multiple submission rule. So what they decide, I think what they use to reject articles is to look at the abstract, the introduction, and your CV. And those are very important factors on whether your article goes on for serious review or whether it is rejected out of hand.
Do you mean that they take into account the fact that you have submitted before to American journal, or to which American journal you have submitted before? Is it taken into account also?
I would think if it's a foreign author, yes, that's important. And publication in American journals by a foreign author would be important to students in making their judgment about whether to look further at this article. My younger folks who submit frequently tell me that you should emphasize in your abstract and introduction the novelty and importance of the article that you have written and are submitting. Let me tell you about climbing the ladder. What does that mean?
Yeah,
Well, climb. I'm sorry, Maria.
This sounds interesting. Yes.
Okay. So what I mean by this is the key here is getting one acceptance. First acceptance. Then what you can do is you can ask either by email if you submitted email or through Scholastica for what's called expedited review. Expedited review means that you have an offer from another journal, you have a deadline by which you must accept it, and you're asking these other journals, presumably ones that you'd prefer to publish in over the one you have the offer from, to give your submission expedited review and get back to you within that window you have by which you must accept or reject the offer that you have. Well, of course, if you get expedited review, and if you have another journal, a better journal that says, we'd like your article, well, then you can ask for expedited review up the ladder to other journals that you might have a shot of getting accepted within that window. So this is common in US law publishing, is you don't always get it. Sometimes you ask for it and you get no response. Sometimes you ask for it and they say, sorry, we don't want your article right away. But I'm told that in about a third of the cases, or 50% of cases, you do get a response from the journal one way or the other. I should say that you can submit 20 article to 20 journals, and you might get 10 rejections the next day. And then it might take a year before you hear from the other 10 journals. Response times are very variable. And concomitantly here, it's often easier to get your articles accepted into one of the specialty journals. And then to try and climb the ladder with that acceptance from a specialty journal. So those are my suggestions. The last slide is some additional free resources that I just wanted to make available to you if you're involved in trying to write an article for a US journal. Maria, did I get it right?
Yes, perfectly right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was yes,
entirely my pleasure. And if you have a question in the future you want to submit, and these materials don't seem to help, my email address is on the first slide. Get in touch with me. I'm happy to try and help.
It was a real pleasure, Mike, to have you here with us. Hopefully, we will have a chance to hear you again and at other occasion. And thank you so much one more time.
My pleasure entirely. Thank you for asking me.